Hey, my friends at Russell Farm, we're getting ready to do about a 20-minute video on drawing faces and characters, so grab a pencil and some paper. This is a great family project for 8-year-olds up, maybe even a little bit younger with some help. Hi Marianne, Pam, and Lee. I hope y'all are having a good time fixing the farm up while we're not out there. Everything's looking great on the pictures I'm seeing. So we're going to go inside and you're going to follow along on a drawing video. Stay tuned. We're going to have 3 or 4 more of these during the month of May. Have fun.
Okay guys, here we go. So I'm going to have you all do a little test. You've got a pencil, you've got some kind of paper. I want you to draw a couple of ovals. They can be real loose and sketchy. You can see a couple of inches, 3 inches, doesn't really matter. If they're a little bit too long and skinny, that's okay. If they're a little bit too round, that's okay. But I'd really like them to look like this one right here. So we're going to do a little test. You're going to take your best oval and you're going to put 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth where you think they should go on a person's face if you were trying to draw it realistically. You can do some little cartoon eyes like this. You could even just do 2 little dots or 2 little dashes for the eyes. For the nose, you might have a little cartoon nose like this. You might want to draw the bottom of a nose. The mouth can just be a line. If you want to go ahead and draw some more realistic lips, or even kind of a cartoon smile, that's fine. Even the ears can be just kind of little cartoon ears, or they could be a little bit more realistic. So before you come back, we're going to pause in just a minute. I want you to stop the video and go and put your eyes and your nose and your mouth and your ears in. So this is where I want you to pause the video. And now when you come back, you should have your oval with this on it. What I want you to do is to try to figure out where the exact halfway mark is. You can estimate like I'm doing. You could actually measure with a ruler and figure out this halfway mark. And look and see where your eyes are. My guess is that most everybody's eyes are above that halfway mark. That's typically what people want to do. Sometimes I see people that draw the eyes that far up on a face, and I rarely see people that draw eyes this far down. Now, if we were looking at a face straight on, it turns out the eyes are exactly on that halfway mark. It feels kind of low because this is all empty head and hair up here. Now, if we take this halfway mark and go to the bottom of the chin and we put another halfway mark, that's where the bottom of the nose should be. And another halfway mark is where the mouth is. Ears typically are from above the eye to about the bottom of the nose. And if you look at your drawing, you'll see you probably, unless you already knew about these proportions, you probably have some funny things going on. Here's the halfway mark. Look at where the eyes are. They're way up here. The nose is on the halfway mark where the eyes should have been, and the mouth is floating down here somewhere else. So let's look at that on another sheet. And this time you can follow along with me. We're going to draw our oval. I'm going to do it a little bit bigger this time. Might even be able to zoom in on this some. There we go. Here's our oval. Now, you can also draw it really lightly. That's kind of helpful when you go back and start to make some changes, and you'll see what I'm going to do with this. So, I'm going to figure out where my halfway mark is. There's a little trick. I can measure from the chin to the halfway mark with my pencil with my fingers, and I can look and see, oh look, I guessed that pretty good. I could take a ruler and see this is 3 inches and put my mark at 1.5 inches. So however you need to do it to figure out where that halfway mark is, even if you need to get somebody to help you figure out where that halfway mark, that's great. So we're going to put our 2 eyes. Now, one of the other proportions with eyes is that there is typically an eye width in between the 2 eyes. So eyes should be an eye width apart. So here's our 2 eyes with an eye width in between. Here's the bottom of our chin. Here's the halfway mark. That's where, in fact, you can copy my nose and my eyes for right now. We can take a little time and finish the eyes up a little bit here. All just starts to look a little bit more realistic. Now, one of the things that is unique to every person is their eyebrows, and so we can come in and do whatever we want to with the eyebrows, but that also makes it look a little bit more realistic here. All right, so we're going to come down between the nose and the bottom of the chin, and we're going to put another halfway mark. That's going to be in between the 2 lips. So underneath I can have a bottom lip, on top I can put a little bit of a top lip. I could make a smile if I want to. You can see already it starts to look a little bit more realistic than something like this. We're going to add the ears a little above the eye down to the nose. Same thing on the other side. Now, we're not even sure kind of how old this person looks. If it's male or female, we might want to add a neck to it. Starts to look a little bit more realistic. I can even add a little bit of a shirt. I could start to put a hint of some shoulders on here. Now, what's really going to make a difference is the hair and the shape of the face. We're going to redo this a couple of times to get this idea down. So I'm just going to kind of play around with putting in some loose hair, maybe even having it come down, and I've decided this looks like a young woman, so I may even decide to narrow the face just a little bit where she's got a little bit sharper chin and a little bit narrower neck, and all of a sudden I have something that looks a little bit more realistic. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is the top of the head is not the same thing as the top of the hair. So I can add more hair up here, which is a little bit more natural, and increase the size of the head. So you can see the more hair somebody has on top, we're not talking about the halfway point between the top of the hair and the chin. We're talking about the top of the head. So somebody that had a big hairdo, we might have to imagine their head inside this. All right, so let's try this again. Got a dirty piece of paper here. I'm going to start over again. All right, so right in here, we're going to start with our oval. Notice how I'm holding my pencil too. I'm not holding my pencil like I'm writing. I'm holding my pencil kind of flat and sideways. That helps me a little bit. So you can see I'm also doing this very light and kind of sketchy on the paper. It gives me a little bit more room to make some changes. I could do this with a marker, but I couldn't go back in and make changes easier. So right now the pencil makes a little bit more sense. So halfway mark. I can go ahead and put my 2 other halfway marks in. I could measure that if I wanted to be really particular to get those halfway marks going there. So there's what we've learned so far. We have a nice oval, divided in half where the eyes go, divided in half again where the bottom of the nose is, and divided in half where the mouth is. So right now we're not looking at anybody's face in particular. We're just thinking about kind of an imaginary person, In a minute, I'm going to show you how we could draw a photograph of ourselves or of somebody else or a favorite person. So right now, we're just kind of thinking generically. We're going to put those two eyes in about an eye width apart. So this is not necessarily a lesson on what shape eyes are, but if you want to carefully follow me and get some ideas of what those eyes might look like to be a little bit more realistic, we might put some very light lines on the side of the nose and be a little bit darker here on the side. We can start to add some other features, and that starts to give a little character to our face. We've got the ears that we know are going to be over here, slightly above the eyes, maybe at the eyebrow level, down to the bottom of the nose. I've done this with kids maybe as young as 8 or 10 years old, which works great. This is also great for adults who haven't looked closely at these proportions. An artist might look at this and say, well, these aren't exactly right. There's some other ways that we can look at this, but this is a real good start that's really basic, and things don't vary much from this. Eyes might be a little bit higher on one person and a little bit lower, but they're never going to be up here. So these things are pretty good to get some general measurements. Now we've done this, and again, at this point you might want to stop the video and practice several of these and then come back and pick up at the next at our next step here. What we're going to do here, if you look at a person or you look at a photograph of a person, their face or their head is not necessarily exactly oval shaped. This actually looks pretty realistic. If we were to be looking at a bald person, they would have a head that was shaped pretty much like this. But things start to happen around this part here, and we might have some cheekbones that stick out, and there might be a little bit of a flattening here. This is starting to look a little bit more masculine with the jaw here, and we're going to have our chin come down maybe a little bit. So all of a sudden we've got something that looks a little bit more specific to a particular person. So when we go back and look at a real person, we might be looking at the shape of their chin, the shape of their jaw. The ears may be a little bit bigger or maybe a little bit smaller or may have a little bit different shape. So you can see I'm kind of fixing this as I go along, drawing a little bit darker. People also tend to have a little bit, everybody has a little bit of that bag under their eye. Now I'm also missing a little hair, which is going to add a lot to this. So I can start to look at some of the details that I might actually see on somebody. So I'm just going to kind of make up a little bit of hair on here. The sideburns going on here, and a little bit of a neck. So again, you can see how easy it would be to stop at this point, go back in the video to this stage where we started with just the oval egg shape, and try this again. You might practice holding the pencil in different ways. Sometimes when you hold the pencil too much like you're writing, it's really hard to get a nice oval. Sometimes if you just kind of back up a little bit and hold the pencil up a little higher, it makes it a little bit easier. Or like this, to hold the pencil a little bit sideways, also is a nice way to get a soft oval. One of the things that you might do is just practice a bunch of ovals all around the page. Once you do this, you could come back in and practice getting that proportion down. We don't even have to draw the features very carefully. We can just put some little indications for the eyes, for the nose, for the mouth. So this would be a real quick way to do what I would call thumbnail sketches. If I were trying to just kind of figure out the basics of something, I might draw a little sketch like this. I have that one out of the picture there. All right, we haven't really gotten into, this is all about proportion and lines. Everybody's is going to look a little bit different. We're not going to do any shading on these very much, but if you want to make these look a little bit more realistic, a little bit of shading on the eyes, or even a little bit of shading down the side of the face or under the chin, would start to make this look a little bit more realistic. So there's our maybe middle-aged man. All right. So let's keep this same idea in mind. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to draw several ovals. And we're going to make a lot of different characters out of these. So we're going to keep the same rules. Rules are pretty simple. We have an oval head. We have our eyes at the halfway mark. We go halfway between the eyes and the chin and we get the nose, and we go halfway between the nose and the chin and we get the mouth. So all of these are going to have that same proportion. I might want to draw these really lightly. I can even get to where I just put a little mark like this on them. Again, if I were a little bit engineered minded, I might make a little template that could show me exactly where these go. I'm kind of used to eyeballing these without measuring. So if you measure yours and you don't quite have that proportion, you might want to use a ruler to get that. So you can see on all of these here, now I've got my proportions. And mainly what I want to do with these is show how different shaped faces can create a totally different look, a different person, a different gender, a different age. This proportion is typically for an adult. These wouldn't be the same, though even without some of the features, they look a little bit like kids. Kids tend to have a little bit more space up here, and the face is compressed a little bit more down here. So we're looking at an adult proportion here. But let's try making the face narrow. We're going to make the chin a little bit narrower here. We're going to put some nice curved eyebrows here. We're going to make the lips a little bit fuller. We're going to add some earrings. And we're going to start playing around with adding a little bit taller hair, a thin neck, maybe a necklace. Notice how my shoulders aren't too square. If I'm making a female character here, I can kind of slant the shoulders down a little bit, put a t-shirt, and all of a sudden I've got something that starts to look a little bit like a recognizable person or a character. This is also a fun way to develop your own characters, and I can show you, if we have time at the end of this, how we can take these proportions and purposefully change them a little bit to get something that's kind of fun. So you can see I narrowed the face, made a pointed chin, made fuller lips, gave her kind of curved eyebrows, thinner neck, slanted shoulders. We'll make this one a little bit squarer with a little bit bigger chin, maybe a little bit bigger ears. I didn't mean to do a mohawk on this, but I think we will anyway. Wider neck. And we've got a young man with a pretty distinct haircut. So here, let's try a really narrow face. This one's almost a little bit like a character here. I'm kind of exaggerating here. It's almost a little bit ghost-like because I've made this one so thin, and I'll put some really thin eyebrows here. So you can see I can start to create all kinds of little characters with this same approach. I can even be a little bit more stylized and not worry too much about drawing things really accurately. And I have a little cartoon character that actually is kind of based on actual proportions. It works really nicely for almost anything. Let me try one here. Again, remember our eyes are about an eye width apart. If I were working a little bit bigger, I might be able to see that a little bit better. I could put glasses on. You might be able to hear my dog howling on the porch because the train is going by. Oh, that looks a little bit like one of my students that I kind of recognize here. So you can see it's kind of fun to play around. Let me try one maybe just a little bit less realistically. Let's start to kind of have fun a little bit here and really kind of change. We'll make a really skinny nose, but we're still going to use the same proportion. We're going to make a little tiny mouth, and we're going to make this face kind of especially thin with a really sharp chin. That may have changed the proportion just a little bit, and maybe a little bit longer head here. They look like they need some little spectacles here. And we're going to make this really have a thin neck here. We'll put a necktie on this guy. He looks like he stayed up too late studying. I can start to add a little bit of shading, but this is really not a shading exercise. All right, so I want to show you now one of the things that I did using my phone. So this morning I practiced a little bit working from a photograph. The problem is if I take a photograph, so this is a picture of me, I need to make sure I'm not doing this, which is getting down low and looking up. It changes the proportion. Here's the opposite. I'm looking down. That doesn't work. Look how big my forehead is. So what I need is a photograph that's straight on. Even this one here, this is the one I actually did the drawing from, even this one has got some distortion from the camera because I'm up so close. So one of the things I can do is hold my arm out really far, take a picture from further away, and then crop it. This one's a little bit more realistic. So here's the drawing that I did from this photograph. I used the same technique. I started with an oval. I put my halfway line. I put the halfway line at the nose, the halfway line at the mouth. Then I looked at the photograph and looked at the exact shape of my face, the exact shape of my nose, my eyes, my glasses, and then my hair and the shirt. But I used the exact same technique. I tried this with an actress that you might recognize, Gal Gadot. Same thing, except her head is underneath here. If I measure the eyes at the halfway mark, her top of her head is right here, and you can see in the photograph that her hair is actually above her head. So that's that proportion that I was talking about right there. All right, now let's try one for fun and not pay attention to those proportions. Let's change the proportions. So let's start with a wider circle instead of an oval. And here's our halfway mark. But let's not use that for the eyes. Let's put the eyes where the nose normally goes. And we're going to make some, and we're going to be maybe a little bit wider spaced here. We're going to make some little funny eyes right down here. And we're going to put that nose, let's put the nose where the mouth normally would go. And let's put the mouth almost down at the bottom. And just for fun, I have no idea what this is going to turn into. Let's add some really big ears to this. It looks like a halfway between a mouse and a... Actually, I think I'm going to turn this into a little mouse. So, I know where the eyes should have gone if this were a human face, but I decided not to. And actually, I didn't plan on drawing that character. It just happened. But now that I have this, I can draw him really easily again because I've got a little set of rules. Here's the head. Here's the halfway mark. His eyes are down here, and I could even play around with exaggerating those eyes a little bit. I know his nose is going to be at that next halfway mark and his mouth all the way down at the bottom. And I can play around with changing the shape of those ears a little bit. Maybe I could play around with making the whiskers a little bit longer. Might even erase a little bit of that in between the head and the ears. Now, we're not worrying about the body right now, but I could kind of imagine that he might have little tiny feet and a little bit of a tail that comes out here. So you can see I can play around with a robot character and use the same proportions. Or I could change the proportions on that and decide I'm going to come way down with my eyes and make these ears really big. And so I can play around with creating all kinds of different characters kind of based on this idea here. So we're going to stop here for the day. Obviously, you could go back and experiment with these. You could copy these again. You could go back and watch some of the earlier ones. I think that lots of people might need to practice with just getting a nice oval. So sometimes just spending a little time drawing oval after oval after oval. Once you do those, it would be fun to play around with that proportion again. It's all halfway, halfway again, halfway again. Easy to create. You can see once we do that, we can create in just a few seconds something that actually looks pretty realistic, especially for a little cartoon character. So I look forward to talking to you again next week. Next week we're going to work on a scene, a little sketch from something at Russell Farm, and I hope y'all are having a good time. Keep doing art. Bye.